skeptic has been widely misunderstood. And in the media and in everyday culture, it's often misused. So I want to clarify that a skeptic is not a cynic. A cynic is someone who dismisses a claim without any evidence. And a skeptic either dismisses or accepts the claim based on the strength of the evidence. So let's say Cousin Joe goes camping, and he comes back and he says, guess what, I saw Bigfoot. Well, if you're a believer, if one grows up hearing Bigfoot stories, maybe it's part of their family lore, or maybe they're like me and they grew up in the 70s and 80s and Bigfoot was everywhere in pop culture, including the $1 Million Man. They might just accept it without asking Joe any questions, right? They'll just say, oh, okay, saw Bigfoot. And a cynic, as I discussed before, is someone who would just dismiss it out of hand and say, oh, you probably saw a bear, or you probably saw a guy in a suit. In this case, it is a guy in a suit, by the way. But skeptics are curious, and they will ask a lot of questions, and they'll analyze the claim using critical thinking, and they'll either accept or dismiss the claim based on the strength of the evidence. So they might ask questions like, well, did you see this thing at night? Or was there anybody else with you who saw this as well? Did you get pictures and video? Did the big hairy guy leave some fur and you took it for analysis? And if Cousin Joe says, well, no, I didn't do any of that, unfortunately, that's really low evidence. So it's not going to pass any scientific scrutiny, and so then a skeptic will dismiss the claim. That doesn't mean that Cousin Joe is lying or stupid or crazy. It just means that we don't have evidence to support his claim. Now, say Cousin Joe goes back camping and he brings a ranger with them and a big trank gun, and they find Bigfoot and they bring in a live specimen. I always advocate for a live specimen. That would satisfy scientific scrutiny. And as skeptics keep an open mind to better and new information. So pretty much every skeptic I know would be really psyched if they did bag a Bigfoot.
Nobel Prize.
Yes. So skepticism is just a tool not to get fooled. And Carl Sagan actually called it our baloney detection kit. So on one end of the spectrum, you have gullible people, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It just means that a person who has a really low standard of evidence. So they really want to believe a claim, so they will cling to the most flimsy amount of evidence because it supports their belief. On the other side of it, you have denialists. There could be a mountain of rock solid evidence, and they're going to dismiss it just because it does not support their belief or it challenges their belief. And the dangerous thing about denialism, though, is it can lead to really bad thinking, including conspiracy theories. And I want to clarify that conspiracies, as we all know, do exist, but we know they exist because of evidence. Often there's, first-hand accounts that are verified. There's primary sources like surveys or data or studies and stuff that all back up that claim. Unfortunately, with conspiracy theories, there's an added element. And one of the elements is really fed by fear. And you have this element of a nefarious secret cabal that controls everything and either hides evidence or they plant evidence. They can't kind of make up their mind on that one. But it leads to really bad thinking and deeper rabbit holes that we want to avoid. So skeptics realize that we're all flawed, right? Our brains sometimes play little tricks on us. And we can be prone to mistakes because we all have our biases and we all carry our beliefs. So we understand we can be fooled. That's why we ask questions, and that's why critical thinking is so important. So what do we mean by critical thinking? There's two very basic types of thinking, fast and slow. Fast thinking, another word for it is heuristics, and they are mental shortcuts. It's kind of like going on autopilot. They don't take a whole lot of effort, and they do serve a purpose. They are useful because You don't want to relearn how to get home every day, or you don't have to want to relearn how to cook an egg in the morning, right? But unfortunately, heuristics can also be unreliable and lead us to being tricked. So that's why, in my experience, I try to use critical thinking and minding your P's and Q's. You want to pause and question. So when you hear a new claim or you read an article, one of the first things you want to ask yourself is, well, what do I know about this topic? So what's my experience with this? Or, what have I been taught about this? And then how do I know what I know? So where did I learn this? How reliable was the source? Is this just something that I picked up from family and friends? Is it something I read in a book a long time ago? Did I just see it on the internet, or did I learn this, formally in formal training? How long ago did I learn this? Because information is constantly being updated. Just think of poor Pluto out there.
Poor Pluto.
So you want to look at how long ago and if it has been updated. And then finally, what am I missing, right? Because again, part of skepticism and critical thinking is humility and realizing we can't possibly know everything, we can't possibly learn everything, so we have to verify our sources. So how can I verify this? What other information is available? And that's where some fact checking will come in, and we'll talk about that later. So critical thinking actually applies in everyday life. And one example is, say you have a really bad headache and you complain to your friend, oh, I have this horrible headache. And your friend says, well, about a month ago, I had this terrible headache and I drank this new herbal tea I got and the headache went away. So if we rely on heuristics, we're just gonna, run out and buy that tea and just guzzle it down. But that can cause some problems. And that's why I always say, mind your P's and Q's. You wanna pause and question. So some questions that we might ask is, well, was the tea responsible for her headache going away, right? Maybe your friend was really dehydrated that day, and by the time she had a nice cup of non-diuretic tea, she was rehydrated and her headache went away. Or maybe she was really stressed out, like Carolyn. Maybe she was really stressed out, and by the time she got home, put her feet up and drank a cup of tea, her blood pressure lowered, and her headache went away. But maybe there is something to the tea. So you look through the ingredients and you're like, oh, maybe you see something like feverfew, and you look it up, and actually there's some evidence to support that feverfew might be helpful for migraines. So you're like, oh, that might be something. But then you keep reading and it says, oh, wait a minute, feverfew is contraindicated in certain medications. So that's when you go, okay, wait a minute, I better ask my doctor before I drink this tea. So yes, critical thinking takes more time and more effort, but as you can see, it can also keep you from being harmed. And why is this important today? Every day we are bombarded with misinformation and deliberate disinformation. And misinformation obviously isn't anything new, but with the internet and social media, the rate and range has greatly increased. For example, there's pink slime journalistic sites that look like real journalism. Actually, most of them look like they're local news, but they're actually, a lot of them are either highly partisan sites or they're even foreign disinformation sites. And then there's content farms that are deliberately spreading disinformation using paid bots, also known as bot armies. And now we have the phenomena of influencers. So unfortunately, we live in a day now where people with little or no relevant expertise at all often get more attention and bigger platforms than actual experts who have the training and the education and qualifications. And studies have found that the majority of health information, for example, shared on TikTok is actually incorrect. One example of that was health officials reported a survey where people believed that sunscreen and not the sun caused skin cancer.
Oh my God.
So this nonsense was actually shared widely on TikTok and other platforms. And people ask me, well, why would people do that? It's called money. So These people actually make money off of monetized accounts. And the more engagement and the more advertisement, the more revenue, right? Also, especially in health and wellness influencers, they also, a lot of them get kickbacks on the products that they promote. So remember your friend who taught you that tea? Well, maybe they saw it on TikTok and that influencer is actually getting money. And another thing I want you to be, just take home with you today is it takes a lot of time to fix the damage done by misinformation. So that's why as skeptics, we want to double check the information before we share it. So recently we had April Fool's Day, and you see a lot of memes online like, oh, you gotta be skeptical of everything that you see online today. You need to be skeptical every single day of what you read online and elsewhere. And we also don't want to be like Ralph, who does his research by just finding information that he agrees with or he likes. We need to use multiple reliable sources, not just one or two. And one way to do that is, a lot of us learned this in school, the CRAP test. And it stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So when we're talking about currency, like I mentioned before, we want to see how current the information is. And actually, if you look at good news sites, standards-based news sites, a lot of the times you'll see the date and it'll say updated on July 6th or something. So you know that somebody is keeping track of the information and updating it as needed. Then there's relevance. We all have heard of clickbait. And you'll see a headline and you're like, oh, this sounds interesting, and then you read the article and it goes completely in a whole new direction. So that's another red flag. One of the more important things is the authority. Who wrote this? What's their qualifications? Or not only what's their qualifications, who's funding them? That's another thing you want to look at. The accuracy, and again, that's where fact checking comes in. How accurate is the information we're putting out there? And then there's purpose. Now, a lot of articles are just straight reporting, and they use primary sources like surveys or transcripts or studies and that kind of thing, and that's good. But then you read articles that are more commentary or opinion, or, again, going back to health and wellness, it starts trying to promote a product. And so that's another red flag to be aware of. So when you're doing the CRAP test, one updated version of it is to add lateral reading. And while you're looking at your article, you want to open multiple tabs and windows and cross-check at the same time that you're reading your article. And a good starting point, I know Susan's going to love this, is Wikipedia. So you want to look at the article because at the bottom of the Wikipedia page is a whole list of citations. And in order to be used on Wikipedia, they have to be from notable sources. You can't just have some random blog or podcast out there. It has to come from a notable source. So it really is a good starting point to find out if the information is accurate. And I mentioned fact-checking before, and I've taken a couple of online seminars about media literacy, and librarians and journalists and researchers have often cited these sources as good fact-checking sites. And Reuters now has a fact-checking section, as does the Associated Press. There's factcheck.org, PolitiFact, Snopes, USA Today. Be aware, though, that these organizations often get criticized, mainly to dissuade people from using them, because unfortunately there are bad actors out there who have agendas and narratives that they don't want challenged. One example is Snopes is not, nor ever has been, owned by George Soros. Unfortunately, that's one of the conspiracy theories that has been started to dissuade people from using these sites. And then here's some great resources online. Thinking is Power is a great website. It's run by my friend Melanie Treesick King. And she's actually a biology professor whose slogan is teach skills, not facts. So obviously facts are necessary. But her mindset is that in order to teach good science literacy, and good critical thinking, you need to learn critical thinking skills. Otherwise, facts are, you need to learn how to discern. And she's got great educational resources on there. So even if you're not an educator, you can go through these lesson plans and you will learn a lot about critical thinking. The News Literacy Project, obviously it caters more towards news literacy, but again, there's educational resources on there to learn from. Skeptical Inquirer magazine covers all things science and reason, and it also helps you, it debunks certain pseudoscience and paranormal claims as well. And one fun resource is the Cranky Uncle game. It was developed by cognitive scientist John Cook, and it helps you look at recognize and learn logical fallacies so that you not only recognize them in somebody's argument about a topic, but you can learn how to form better arguments yourself. So I hope you learned a little bit more about what we mean by skepticism today and what we mean by critical thinking. And I hope that you'll join us at Rational Roundtable. We get together every other month at the Hangout over on School Street. We also take fun field trips. I think they're fun. We take fun field trips. For example, we've gone to Monterey's Skeptic Camp. We've gone to the World of Wonders Museum here in Lodi. And we've gone to the wonderful Chabot Space and Science Center that we were so fortunate that Leonard gave us a wonderful tour. We hope to go back there again someday, and there's more events being planned. So visit our website for more information. We would love to have you join us. We would love to bring us into the community and out to the community and promote critical thinking. So thank you for listening today. And we have time for a couple of questions if you really need to ask them.
Does anyone have any questions?
Jay always does.
Of course.
Are you suggesting that?
You don't need it.
I don't need it. Are you in any way suggesting that Ralph from The Simpsons might not be a reliable source?
I am indeed. I don't think I need much evidence to back that up either.
Not an extraordinary play.
Yeah, not extraordinary.
Any other questions?
What's that cranky uncle game? If I Google it, will it come up?
Yeah, it should.
Okay.
And you can look up John Cook, who's the developer. It's I played it. It's again, it teaches you logical fallacies and yeah.
Can you explain it in just like 30 seconds?
It explains logical fallacies.
No, how does the game work?
So, cranky uncle is your cranky uncle who believes in conspiracy theories. In this case, mostly about climate change. And when you try and push back with cranky uncle, he will give you a claim, and you need to learn what kind of logical fallacy he's using. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, so it will teach you how to recognize logical fallacies as you're playing the game.
Argue with somebody for fun.
Yes, yes. And in this case, it's not a real person, so, you know.
So you can.
Yeah.
I don't think most of the people on Facebook are either, so it's,
Yeah, unfortunately.
I guess bots.
yeah, the bots.
We got lots of bots, so.
I
Yes.
have, I've tried to distinguish between conspiracy theories, since theory suggests rational examination of ideas, and conspiracy delusions.
Yes.
That's not what we usually mean when we're talking that term.
And that is a better description. I try to avoid using the word delusion when we're trying to persuade people to think better, because unfortunately we might get some pushback that, you know, because they might take it as a derogatory,
Good point.
and they might be defensive, and they may dig down deeper, and we don't want that.
So then you just use fancier words.
Basic.
Conspiratorial ideology.
Yeah, and, yeah, we really want to, and this, I have a whole other talk on this, but yeah, we really want to have better communication because I know Jay might disagree with me. There have been some studies about the pushback effect and blowback effect, that when you just dump facts on people or just debunk something, sometimes there's a tendency of people to just dig down deeper in their belief, and we want to avoid that. And there has been evidence, Mick West has talked about it, Lee McIntyre has talked about it, David McRaney, that if we ask certain questions and we argue in a way that we get the person to think about how they're thinking or why they think what they do, it helps them reflect on their own thinking and maybe turn on a couple of light bulbs that maybe they might be wrong. So it might just, it might take their confidence in their belief less. And that's actually a good thing. So if they start to have a lower confidence in the belief and they start asking questions, that's what we want, because it leads to better thinking. Any other questions? Because I know Susan's raring to go, and let me tell you. So.
All right, so I think we're gonna take just a 2-minute tech break and swap devices and help yourselves to some snacks, and we'll be right back.